The storm on Jara 9 was like nothing I'd ever felt before. The wind howled, bitter and violent, tearing through the ice and snow with a force that could crush a man. My ship had been hit by KL Dominion fighters, and we crashed deep into the icy wasteland of this frozen world. The rest of the crew didn't make it. I was alone, struggling to stay alive in the freezing chaos. My suit was torn, leaving me exposed to the deadly cold. My head throbbed from the crash, and the oxygen levels in my helmet were dropping fast. Every breath was a struggle, and I could feel my body starting to slow down as the cold seeped in. The snow beneath my boots was thick and unforgiving, but I pushed forward, hoping to find some shelter before my suit gave out completely. I had no idea where I was going, no sense of direction in the endless white expanse. My HUD flickered weakly, showing signs of power loss. A storm like this could kill anyone in minutes, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the cold took me. I stumbled, my legs barely holding me up, when I saw something in the distance, a figure moving through the storm. I squinted through the swirling snow, unsure if I was imagining things, but the figure grew clearer as I got closer. She was tall and thin, her skin a pale blue, standing in the middle of the blizzard as though it didn't even touch her. She wasn't wearing much, just furs wrapped around her, barely enough to protect her from the storm. Yet, she looked perfectly calm. I stumbled toward her, barely able to stand. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched me as I approached. "You're not from here," she said, her voice soft but carrying over the wind. "Human." I nodded weakly, trying to catch my breath. "Help," I managed to gasp, barely able to get the words out. She tilted her head slightly, studying me, then pointed toward a small, squat hut barely visible through the snow. "Come," she said. "You'll freeze if you stay out here." It didn't take much to convince me. I was on the brink of collapse, and the thought of warmth was enough to push me forward. The hut was small, built from rough wood and stone. As soon as I stepped inside, I was hit by the warmth. It was a sharp contrast to the bone-chilling cold outside, and I sighed in relief, feeling the heat seep into my frozen body. The woman closed the door behind me and turned to face me. She had a calm, almost curious look in her eyes, but something about her made me uneasy. She didn't seem human. The way she moved, the way she stared at me, it felt like she was studying me, like I was some sort of experiment. "Sit," she said, motioning to a small chair near a fire. I sank into it gratefully, feeling my strength slowly return as the warmth spread through my limbs. She went to a small table in the corner, her movements fluid and controlled, and began pouring something into a cup. It smelled sweet, like herbs, but I couldn't tell if it was safe to drink. My instincts told me to be careful, but my body screamed for anything that could help me recover. She turned back to me, her eyes never leaving mine as she handed me the cup. "Drink," she urged. "It will help." I hesitated for a moment, then took the cup from her, feeling the heat of it against my cold fingers. My lips touched the rim, and I took a careful sip. It was warm, almost too warm, but it tasted sweet and soothing. It settled in my stomach like fire, driving away the last of the cold that clung to me. But as I drank, something felt wrong. I glanced up, meeting her gaze again. She was watching me closely, almost too closely, and I began to feel a growing unease. Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't place, something predatory. Her sharp features, the faint glimmer of teeth behind her lips, all of it suddenly seemed off. "You're not Kale," I muttered, trying to steady myself. My head was clearing now, but something wasn't adding up. She was too calm, too perfect. For someone who lived in a place like this, no, she replied, her voice colder now. But I serve them. For now. The air in the hut suddenly felt thicker, the warmth turning oppressive. My heart skipped a beat. The truth was sinking in. She wasn't just a stranger helping me out of kindness. She had an agenda, and I was part of it. I stared at her, the cup still in my hands, as she slowly circled around me, her movements smooth and deliberate. The warmth from the drink had started to dull the ache in my body, but it didn't ease the rising sense of danger I felt. She had already shown me that she wasn't an ordinary person, but now, with the way she was moving and the sharpness in her eyes, it was clear. She wasn't just some lonely survivor in the middle of a frozen wasteland. There was something else behind. Her calm demeanor, something far darker. "You're from Earth," she said, her voice low and curious, almost as if she was testing me. I nodded, trying to keep my thoughts focused. "Yes," I said, my voice rough. "I'm human." She smiled faintly, but it wasn't the kind of smile you expect from someone offering help. It was the smile of a hunter who had found her prey. "I know. I've studied your kind," she said, leaning closer, her eyes scanning me like a predator examining its catch. "Strong, resilient, but fragile. All it takes is the right kind of pressure." Her voice trailed off, and for a moment, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. Something was off. I looked at her, trying to steady my breathing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was caught in a web, slowly tightening around me. She continued, her voice softer now, but with an edge of something I couldn't quite understand. "I've always admired humans. You are fascinating creatures, so full of will, yet so easily broken." Her eyes lingered on me as she stepped closer, her bare feet making no sound on the floor. My mind raced, trying to make sense of her words, but everything seemed to be unraveling too fast. "Why did you help me?" I asked, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. "Why save me if you're working with the Kale?" She looked amused. "I didn't say I was helping you, human. I'm merely interested." The air seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. My heart began to beat faster, and I stood up slowly, feeling my limbs protesting. The temperature inside the hut, once comforting, suddenly felt stifling, almost suffocating. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to run, but something kept me rooted in place. The walls of the hut seemed to close in, and my mind flashed to the blizzard outside. It was too late to run. "I serve the Kyle, yes," she continued, the smile never leaving her lips. "But I serve them. For now. They promised my people survival, power, if we help them hunt the humans." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I staggered back, my hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm holstered at my waist, but she was too quick. In one fluid motion, she was in front of me, her claws extended, her body an immovable force. The blade hidden beneath her cloak gleamed. In the dim light, its cold edge a reminder of just how dangerous she was. "You should have known," she whispered, the coldness in her voice sending a shiver down my spine. "Humans are always the prey, and I am the hunter." Before I could react, she lunged, the blade slashing through the air toward my chest. I barely managed to dodge, stumbling back and knocking over a pile of crates in the corner. The hut's interior erupted into chaos, the air thick with tension. My heart pounded in my ears as I scrambled for anything that could help me. My hand found a thermal rod, something I had been carrying for warmth, still hot from the drink she had given me. Without thinking, I activated it, the blue flame flaring to life, cutting through the air like a deadly blade. She hissed, retreating just enough to avoid the heat, but not enough to give me an opening. Her eyes narrowed, and I knew I had only seconds before she came at me again. I moved instinctively, the thermal rod held out in front of me as I backed toward the door. My body screamed with pain, my mind raced with fear, but my will to survive kept me moving. I couldn't let her get close. I couldn't let her win. I needed to get out of here, now. With a roar, she charged, and I forced myself to act. The door behind me burst open, the blinding snow outside suddenly washing over me in a rush. I didn't look back. I just ran. The cold hit me like a wall, but it didn't matter. I had no choice. I had to escape. I didn't know if she was following me, if she was even still alive, but I wasn't about to stick around to find out. The storm was my only ally now, and as the snow closed in around me, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting for humanity's future. And whatever her plans were, I was going to make sure she didn't get away with them. I stumbled through the snow, barely able to keep my balance, my body exhausted and trembling from the cold. The storm had turned from a deadly blizzard to an almost suffocating wall of ice and wind, but I had no choice but to push forward. My breath came in ragged gasps, the cold air burning my lungs as I tried to focus on the only thing that mattered: survival. I couldn't stop now. She was out there. Somewhere. I didn't know if she was still chasing me, or if I'd gotten ahead. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to wait around and find out. The thought of her close behind, hunting me like prey, drove me faster, even though I felt my strength beginning to wane. I was an experienced soldier, but this planet was nothing like the war zones I was used to. The cold and the storm were relentless, enemies of their own, and every step forward felt like a battle. I glanced back, half expecting to see her shadow moving through the storm, but the blizzard had swallowed everything in its path. The world around me was a blur of white. I could barely see more than a few feet in front of me. I needed shelter, somewhere to regroup and plan my next move. I could feel the heat from the thermal rod still in my hand, a small comfort amidst the freezing cold, but even its warmth couldn't fight off the overwhelming fatigue that threatened to drag me down. As I trudged on, my mind kept racing. What had she meant by all that talk of humans being prey? And why was she working with the Kyle? The Kyle Dominion had been humanity's enemy for years, a ruthless force determined to crush Earth and its colonies. Yet here I was, fighting for my life on an icy planet with an alien woman who claimed to serve them, but had her own agenda. My thoughts were interrupted by a sudden crackling sound in the air. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. The sound came, again, closer this time. I didn't have to turn around to know what it was. Her voice echoed in my mind, her chilling words replaying. Humans are always the prey. It felt like a warning, a threat. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep going, but I couldn't let her catch me. Not again. I pushed myself forward, ignoring the growing numbness in my limbs and the pain that shot through my chest with every breath. In the distance, I saw something. Through the haze of snow, a faint outline of another building. Or maybe a cave. It didn't matter what it was. I was running out of options, and this was my best chance. As I neared the structure, I could hear the faint hum of machinery. A faint light flickered from within. It was a small outpost, something I hadn't noticed before in the storm. Whoever had built it had probably left it behind years ago, but for now, it was a lifeline. I rushed toward it, my legs feeling like lead as I neared the entrance. When I reached the door, I forced it open with every last ounce of strength I had left. Inside it was dark, but the faint glow of old equipment suggested it had once been operational. My body hit the floor, collapsing in a heap, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was too tired to move, too cold to think clearly, but I had no choice. I couldn't stay here for long. If she found me, I wouldn't have a chance. I forced myself to stand, my hands shaking as I fumbled through the wreckage of the outpost. It looked abandoned, but there might be something useful. I didn't have time to be picky. I needed a weapon, a tool, anything that could help me survive. My fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. A rifle, or what was left of it. I grabbed it, trying to ignore the weak feeling in my body. This would have to do. Just as I secured the rifle in my hands, the sound of something outside caught my attention. My heart stopped. It was faint at first, but there was no mistaking it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, cutting through the storm. My blood ran cold. She had found me. The hunter was closing in. I backed into the darkest corner of the outpost, my finger tightening around the trigger of the rifle. There was no more running. There was no more hiding. The fight was coming. And I would face it head on, or die trying. The cold, the storm, the alien woman. It didn't matter anymore. I was going to fight for my life. And if I had to face her, I would make sure she regretted underestimating humanity. I crouched low in the corner of the outpost, the rifle clenched tightly in my hands, my body tense as the footsteps grew louder. Each sound was a reminder of how much danger I was in. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the cold air in the room making every breath feel like it was freezing my lungs. I was out of options. She was coming, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength left to fight. The woman had hunted me through the snow, and now she was so close I could almost feel her presence in the air. She was no ordinary human. No ordinary anything. I knew from the way she moved, from the things she'd said, that she was far more than what I had first assumed. Outside, the storm howled as though the planet itself was conspiring against me. But in the midst of it, there was something more. Something almost alive about the air. A coldness that wasn't just from the blizzard. The door to the outpost creaked, and I knew she was there. She had found me. The silence between us felt suffocating. My fingers tightened around the rifle, every muscle in my body screaming at me to do something, anything. But I waited. The time for running was over. The time for hiding was over. The fight was now. Then, without warning, the door slammed open with a force that sent a shockwave through the outpost, knocking dust and debris into the air. A figure stepped through. The woman. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second I saw something in them that was more terrifying than the storm itself. It wasn't just anger. It was the cold certainty of someone who had already won. I took a deep breath, knowing this was it. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. I wasn't going to just stand here and let her claim victory without putting up a fight. She grinned, the edges of her mouth pulling up in a mockery of warmth. "You didn't think you could outrun me, did you?" she said, her voice a blend of amusement and cold calculation. The rifle in my hands felt heavier than it ever had before, but I lifted it, trying to steady my shaking hands. "I knew you'd fight," she continued, stepping closer. "But you're not prepared for what comes next. You think you can defeat me, a member of the Kyle?" The arrogance in her voice was palpable, and it almost made me hesitate. But I couldn't. If I did, she'd win. I didn't have time for hesitation. I raised the rifle, aiming it straight at her. She didn't flinch. She didn't even seem worried. In fact, she looked almost bored. She extended her hand, as if inviting me to try. "Go ahead," she taunted. "You think that will stop me? You think a weapon designed for your kind can even touch me?" The storm outside raged louder, as though the world itself was urging me to act. I knew she was right. This rifle, despite being one of the best humanity had, was not made for something like her. But that didn't matter. I had one advantage that she didn't have: ingenuity. I lowered the rifle, not in defeat, but in preparation. She blinked, surprised by the sudden change in my stance. "You're not going to shoot?" she asked, an edge of curiosity in her voice. I didn't answer. Instead, I threw the rifle to the side, pulling out a small device from my jacket. It was something I had scavenged from the wreckage earlier, something I hadn't had time to test, but now I had no choice but to hope it worked. I slammed the device onto the ground. It emitted a low hum before suddenly sending a burst of electromagnetic energy through the room. The air crackled with power, and I could feel the pulse reverberating in my chest. For a moment, she looked stunned, her eyes wide in disbelief. The energy burst had disrupted the atmospheric balance of the room, scrambling her advanced systems. I knew she wasn't human, but she relied on some kind of tech to amplify her abilities. The device had thrown her off balance just long enough for me to make a move. I lunged forward, using the split-second opening to tackle her. She wasn't expecting me to be that fast. She thought she had all the time in the world. But in that instant, I caught her off guard, knocking her to the ground. My body ached, but I didn't care. I had one chance, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. She struggled beneath me, trying to regain her footing, but I was already on top of her. The cold floor beneath us felt like ice against my skin, but it didn't matter. I pressed my advantage, using every ounce of strength I had left. She was strong, no doubt, but so was I. Her eyes flashed with a dangerous intensity as she finally threw me off, sending me sprawling across the floor. But I was already moving, back on my feet, not giving her any time to react. The storm outside howled louder, a constant reminder that there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. It was just us in this tiny outpost, and one of us was going to leave alive. In that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting for humanity's future, and I wasn't going to let this alien woman, no matter how powerful, take that away from me. The fight had only just begun. The air in the outpost crackled with tension as we circled each other, both of us bruised, battered, and breathing heavily. I could feel the weight of every second pressing down on me. The alien woman, she was fast, almost too fast to keep up with, her movements sharp and calculated. She was powerful, there was no doubt about it, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I had something she didn't: the will to fight, the determination to survive. This was more than just a physical battle. It was about humanity's place in the universe. We had survived impossible odds before, and we could do it again. But right now, I had to outsmart her. She lunged at me with incredible speed, her limbs moving like a blur. I barely had time to react, rolling to the side to avoid her strike, but I could feel the air pressure shift as she passed, the power of her attack sending a shock through the room. I knew I had to do something fast. I had no weapon now, my rifle had been tossed aside in the heat of the fight, and the outpost wasn't exactly equipped with anything useful. But the longer I fought her, the more I understood her tactics. She was using her strength and speed to wear me down, trying to push me into a corner where I couldn't move. That wasn't going to happen. With a burst of adrenaline, I launched myself toward the control panel at the back of the room. I didn't know if it would work, but I had to try something. My fingers fumbled over the buttons, trying to figure out how to activate the emergency systems. The woman was hot on my heels, and I could hear her footsteps coming closer. So close I could almost feel her breath on my neck. I didn't have time to think. I just acted. I slammed my hand onto a red button, and the lights in the outpost flickered, as a loud alarm sounded, sending a wave of panic through the air. I didn't know what I had just activated, but I didn't care. It bought me a moment. I turned and faced her, ready for the next move. She was momentarily distracted by the flashing lights and the blaring siren. For a second, I could see her confusion, the first crack in her perfect facade. That was all I needed. I charged at her, my body moving on pure instinct, using the last of my strength to slam into her. The force of the impact sent us both tumbling to the floor, but this time I was on top. I had her pinned. She struggled beneath me, her eyes filled with fury, but I didn't let up. I knew this was my chance. I wasn't just fighting for my life anymore. I was fighting for every human being out there who had ever been underestimated. For every soldier, every survivor who had fought and died for the future of humanity. I wasn't going to let her, or anyone like her, take that away. But even with all my determination, I knew I couldn't win this fight with strength alone. She was too powerful, too skilled. I had to find a way to exploit her weaknesses. I had to keep her off balance, keep her from getting the upper hand again. I reached down and grabbed a piece of debris that had fallen from the ceiling in the chaos, a sharp piece of metal that had been dislodged by the blast earlier. It wasn't much, but it was enough. With a swift motion, I drove it into her side. She screamed in pain, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. She wasn't invincible. She could be hurt, but the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She managed to grab my arm and twist it, forcing me to release my hold. Pain shot through my body as she threw me off once more, sending me crashing into the wall. I struggled to get up, but I could feel my body growing weaker, my movements slower. She stood over me now, her hand raised, preparing to strike the final blow. I was out of options. My vision blurred, and my breath came in ragged gasps. But then, something inside me snapped. This wasn't the end. Not yet. With everything I had left, I reached up and grabbed the control panel that was still hanging from the wall. My hand slapped the emergency override button one more time, and suddenly the ground beneath us began to tremble. The emergency system had activated something else, a backup energy source, a system designed to protect the outpost. In case of a breach, it was powerful, unpredictable, and it was coming online just as she was about to end me. The lights flashed brighter, and the room filled with an electrical hum that made my skin tingle. The woman's eyes widened, realizing too late that her advantage had been lost. The power surged, and a burst of energy shot out from the walls, striking her with an intensity I'd never imagined. She screamed, the sound echoing through the outpost, but it wasn't enough. The energy continued to course through her, and with one final, deafening explosion, she collapsed to the ground. For a moment, everything was still. The storm outside seemed to quiet, the blaring alarms fading into silence. My body was racked with pain, and my muscles screamed in protest, but I had done it. She was down, and for the first time since this battle began, I allowed myself to breathe. But the victory wasn't just mine. It was humanity's. We had faced an unbeatable enemy, and come out on top. Against all odds, against the overwhelming power of the alien woman and her Kale masters. We had shown that humanity wasn't just a species to be hunted. We were a species to be reckoned with. And I knew, deep down, this was just the beginning. The galaxy had learned one thing that day. Never underestimate humans. The aftermath of the battle was a strange kind of silence. The alarms had died down. The hum of the emergency system was barely a whisper. And outside, the storm still raged, but it didn't matter anymore. I was alive. I had won. But even in my triumph, I felt the weight of what had just happened press heavily on me. The woman, she wasn't just any alien. She was a part of something far bigger, something that was now looking at humanity with a new understanding. It was clear from the look in her eyes, right before I took her down, that she never expected me to fight back the way I did. I stumbled to my feet, my body aching from the brutal exchange. My arms felt like lead, and my legs wobbled beneath me. The adrenaline that had carried me through the fight was starting to fade, leaving me drained and weak. But I didn't have time to rest. I knew what this meant. The Kyle, the powerful, alien species she had belonged to, were going to come after me. They would come after humanity, and the galaxy would watch, trying to figure out how this small, seemingly insignificant species had managed to defeat one of their own. I approached the woman's fallen body, half expecting her to leap up and strike me down with one last, desperate attempt at revenge. But she didn't move. The energy from the outpost system had done its job, rendering her unconscious, perhaps even dead. I checked her pulse, relieved to feel the faint thrum of life still there. But she was no threat anymore. She was just another fallen enemy, but I couldn't afford to relax. I had to think. My mind raced through the possibilities, calculating what needed to be done next. I couldn't stay here. There was too much risk, too much danger. If the Kyle discovered what had happened, they would send more. Worse, they might send something worse than her. The galaxy was vast, and we were still so young in terms of space exploration. This battle might have been won, but it wasn't over. The war, if you could call it that, had just begun. The room around me was a mess. Debris scattered, parts of the walls scorched from the energy blast, and the air thick with the smell of burnt metal. I looked out the cracked windows and saw nothing but the swirling storm outside. It felt like a perfect metaphor for everything I had just been through. Violent, chaotic, and impossible to predict. But one thing was clear. Humanity had survived. I had survived. And in that survival, I realized something profound. We weren't just fighting for our lives anymore. We were fighting for our future. For a place in this universe. We had made it through, and we were stronger for it. It wasn't just physical strength that had won the day. It was our resilience, our ability to adapt and think on our feet. While the Kyle might have underestimated us, we had shown them that we were not easily defeated. I gathered my strength, my breath steadying as I took in my surroundings one last time. I had to leave. I had to warn Earth. They needed to know what was coming. But as I turned to leave the outpost, I paused, glancing back at the woman. It felt strange, almost, to leave her there so lifeless. She had been a predator, a symbol of an alien species who thought they were invincible. But now she was just a reminder of our survival. I moved to the control panel and activated the transmission beacon. A signal would be sent to the fleet, to Earth. The words that left my mouth were simple, but they carried the weight of everything I had just experienced. The Kyle are coming. We need to prepare. As the message went out, I couldn't help but feel the bitter taste of what was to come. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. We had been underestimated, written off as weak, but now we were a force to be reckoned with. And though the storm outside had not yet passed, I knew one thing for certain. Humanity would never back down. We had fought the impossible, and we had won. Now, the galaxy would know the truth. Humanity wasn't just a survivor. We were a power that could not be ignored. And this was only the beginning.